Hello, friends of Studio Brûlé. This is Steve Brûlé, and it is coffee time, where I go over some of the stuff that's come across my desk since we last got together. And today, I had so many things that screen capped, I decided to break it into two sessions. So today's 12:30 session is called The Tragic Comedy of American Politics. And as you can tell from the thumbnail, who's front and center? Well, there's a lot of choices, but in this case, it's AOC. This afternoon's session is quite a lot different, and we're talking about, this is at 2:30. The 2:30 session, let me just get the title of it up for you here so I get it fairly exact. The rich get richer, the poor get sicker. And this is related to the coronavirus, and I'm going to be talking about other coronavirus-related things in there as well, including some new serious side effects and what the side effect reporting system is doing and how they are not exactly honest with us even a year later. The misinformation coming from the elite throughout the coronavirus pandemic has been incredible. So before I go, I'm not going to go off onto that right now because that's coming up at 2:30 this afternoon. And today I'm going to say hello to a few of the regulars. Jose Veguila, EDP, welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy this one, so let's get straight into it. And this is the tragic comedy of American politics. Let's start with Harry and Meghan. Now, you could say this is not American politics, but it certainly is American mainstream culture because they've moved to California and they are doing anything but getting out of the spotlight. So there's a couple of issues that surfaced in these articles that I wanted to touch on because they relate to our general theme here at Studio Brûlé. Let's read this from the Daily Mail. Harry reveals heavily pregnant Meghan told him how she was going to kill herself just before they attended concert at Royal Albert Hall, but didn't because she didn't want him to lose another woman in my life. That any beginning psychologist will tell you is pure out and out manipulation. She's been manipulating Harry from the beginning, and Harry is turning out to be not the pillar of stability that we might have once thought. This came out on May 21st, 2021. Let's move on to the next couple of excerpts from this that caught my eye. The scariest thing for her was her clarity of thought. She hadn't, quote, lost it. No, Meghan hasn't lost anything. She is extremely calculated. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't self-medicating, be it through pills or through alcohol. She was absolutely sober. She was completely sane. Yet in the quiet of night, these thoughts woke her up. Harry, you need to wake up, because this woman is playing you like a fiddle, and she's got every string in you. Reading another quote here. Harry said he felt there were parallels in their stories when he followed in his mother's footsteps and began dating a person of color. Here it starts to intersect with American politics. Started dating a person of color. I don't believe for a second that anybody's color or lack of color in this drama has anything to do with anything. The pulling the color issue in here is purely because the left have successfully created a false impression of systemic racism and white supremacy being the big issue throughout North America. We've talked about this in the past. This is a play issue just trying to weaken the West and weaken the U.S. And do you need the left, elitist, globalist left, need a weakened U.S. in order to usher in their one world government, which they've been pushing at since the League of Nations, I believe it was first called after World War I, and even more strongly in the United Nations, which is the second born of the elitist globalist movement, the United Nations, which we have to this day, and they have been openly pushing for the one world government. But here Harry throws in, Harry may even believe this, because Harry is proving to be a very easily manipulated person. Very easily manipulated. And Meghan swept right in there, and she's got him tied around her little finger. She just needs to breathe a little word, a hint of something, and Harry's jumping all over it. Since she began following in his mother's footsteps. In what possible way is Harry following in his mother's footsteps? Harry was born a prince. Diana was not. That's only one of the small differences. And it's nothing to do with dating a person of color. They're trying to tap into the immense hysteria around racism and white supremacy, a fake issue floated to the top by the ultra-wealthy elite. Let's move on. Harry says, my mother was chased to her death while she was in a relationship with someone who wasn't white. And now look what's happened. First of all, Diana was having an affair with a guy. The paparazzi are all over the affair. The paparazzi are all over anything juicy that can sell newspapers. It had nothing to do with dating a guy who wasn't white. And he was an Egyptian prince or something like that, by the way, a very wealthy, and nobody at the time, I don't recall an issue being made of his color. I don't made anything issue being made of his being Egyptian. No, the juicy issue was Diana, the Princess of Wales, was having an affair with a very wealthy fellow. Of course, people are going to want to, the paparazzi are going to want that story. It's juicy. Very, very juicy. Unfortunately, Diana made all kinds of questionable decisions. Diana herself probably could have benefited from some therapy. But in any case, that's a different topic. Harry's trying to associate himself with this very tragic, popular theme in American culture, or I should say Western culture, including the UK. Let's move forward here. Now, this goes on to another one, touching on the very same people capitalizing on the leftists creating this fake issue of white supremacy and systemic racism in our culture. They've been pushing it so hard, they've managed to get critical race theory to be accepted and pushed in the education system. Critical race theory. Absolute crap. But anyways, that's again another topic for another long session. Here, let's read this from the Daily Wire, May 24th, only 2 days ago. Hate crime hoax. Racist messages sent to black female students were sent by a black female student. Why am I not the slightest bit surprised at this? Not the slightest bit. And yet, you're going to see the story is even worse than the headline. Reading from the top. Last month, female students of color at White Bear Lake High School South Campus in Minnesota were invited into a group chat on Instagram where they were sent threatening and racist messages. Hundreds of students walked out of class to protest the messages, and messages of condemnation were sent by school administrators. Of course, everybody was raising the flag of this nasty white supremacism, and in fact, every single time, correct me if I'm wrong, but every single time the accusation of white supremacy and systemic racism has raised up to the top of one of these things, it's been, upon inspection, has been proven to be absolute fake, false flag. These people, malicious people are making use of the elitist fake racism, fake white supremacy, fake systemic racism issue created by the feminists and the left. Let's read on. As the Daily Wire reported earlier this month, Superintendent Wayne Kazmierczak sent a statement to the White Bear Lake community calling the incident a hoax. Good for you. This determination came after an investigation that included the FBI and local law enforcement found a single student was behind the incident. Right to the FBI, folks. Reading from the top. Because of Kazmierczak's statement, which included a comment about the student posing no threat, quote, no threat to our students of color, it was plausibly assumed that a student of color was behind the incident, quite plausibly. as has been the case in nearly every other alleged incident of hate on campus, and not just this campus. You could call this an epidemic of false flags coming from students of color, people of color around the West, falsely. They are creating their own hoaxes, trying to implicate innocent white people of crimes they are creating. They should be thrown in jail for this. This is inciting hate, and it is a hate crime. Let's have another read here for another quote. Now it has been confirmed that a black female created the group, according to police reports obtained by the College Fix. This damn power is fluctuating on me again. They've confirmed it. So now they have a hate crime identified. They have confirmed who did it, and they've confirmed it's a hate crime. So what do they do next? Let's read on. The school district did not release the race of the student behind the hoax, but the police reports confirmed the student was a member of the Black Excellence Club. Imagine that. The Black Excellence Club. What does Black Excellence mean? Fake victim? Committing hate crimes against other races? Is that what they imply here? That's certainly what it's starting to look like. We are seeing the rise of black hatred of all other races, and it's being not only tolerated, it's being accepted. Nothing is being done about it. Let's read on. Whose members were invited into the group chat to receive the hateful messages. This is a carefully planned out hoax, specifically designed to generate hatred and outrage against white students and white people in general. Read onwards. Most of the messages were too vile to print. Too vile to print. Again, the reason being they're trying to implicate, they're drawing off the fake white supremacy theme that's been generated by the elite in our culture. But included get hanged, die, kill yourself, and quote, that's why George Floyd died. Can't wait until everyone your color leaves like that. This written, propagated by black female students. We want equality. I want equality. I want them to be held accountable. I want them kicked out of school and stuck in prison. I want them to do the prison time that a person who would actually send those messages would get. That's what they deserve, possibly more, because they are duping the entire culture. These are disgusting criminals. Black or white, these black women, in this case, deserve to be in jail. But what do we see happen? Let's read from the top. Despite the outrage and hurt this hoax caused the White Bear Lake community, the perpetrator will not face any criminal charges. That to me is looking like black privilege. There's no systemic racism against blacks. There's black privilege throughout the West. They can commit crimes, and they not only often get off without charges, they get celebrated as heroes in our culture. This is a sickness of the West that has become endemic throughout the culture. It is a sickness. History will not look well upon these people, nor this time for this, nor the politicians of our time. They are all sick and hungry with power, and too vile to stand up with a spine against this crap. Reading again onwards, had the perpetrator turned out to be white, one can expect criminal charges would be filed. You can bet they would have. And the full force of the law would have been placed behind it. Let's read on. And they're not doing black people any credit for this. Black people should stand up and demand justice because the actions of these few, and there are not very many black people who would stoop this low to do this kind of vile crap. There are not very many. Let's be very clear this. This is not an indictment of black people. This is an indictment of a sleazebag student girl who gets off scot-free of a crime just because of her color, indicating that our culture, in fact, has an enormous amount of black privilege built into it. The overwhelming majority of black people would want nothing to do with this woman, and rightly so. But they're not speaking up, so they do have some culpability in this issue. Black people in general, black groups, should be outraged that a black woman is getting away with this kind of crime. They should put a stop to it, because if a white person speaks up, nobody will listen. And that's the truth. We are facing right now, in our age, pure racism against white people. And this came from the feminists and their elevation of the nonsense of white privilege and white guilt and white fragility, and now just plain whiteness as evil. This is coming from Marxist feminists, supported by the globalist elite. Make no mistake about it, they intend to use white people in their as guinea pigs, as fodder, as pawns in their quest for global power. Let's read this second paragraph here. The case as presented by law enforcement did not warrant criminal charges. This is coming from Ramsey County Prosecutor's Office spokesman Dennis Gerhardstein told The Fix. Oh yeah? I guarantee you, if it wasn't a black woman, if it was a white person, and this was a legitimate race crime, you would have been all over it and would have been all over the news. It would have been in the news cycle for months. They would have followed every single detail of the case. We've been still hearing about it a year from now. But because it's a black woman, sweep it under the rug. This is outrageous. Let's read on. Another student involved in the hoax will also not be charged, according to The Fix. This student lied to police and the assistant principal about not sending the messages. Lies, hoax, attacks. These are legitimate, proven hate crimes, and they're not being dealt with. They're not being dealt with because the only acceptable target of hatred is white people. That is the systemic racism that's on in our culture today. In Canada, it's legal to deny a white person a job just because they're white in Canada. A white man, I should say. Only white men in Canada, because all groups of people, none excluded, are protected in Canada. The only excluded, unprotected group in Canada is white men. You can openly discriminate against white men in hiring and promoting practices in Canada. That is real, honest to goodness, legitimate, systemic discrimination, systemic racism, systemic sexism in Canada. Don't want to hear anything more from these lying creeps. This from BBC News. Sasha Johnson, Black Lives Matter activist shot by group of men. You've probably seen the headline, folks. You've seen the headlines. Sasha Johnson, she was up there in the news with Black Lives Matter, a leader of the Black Lives Matter group, pumping her fist up in the air, claiming that there's systemic racism, and proudly claiming her intention to get rid of systemic racism against black people, blah-de-blah-de-blah, of which there isn't any. And worse than that, as we shall soon see. Here she is here. And this, look at this person tweeting this. This is Diane Abbott, MP. She is a member of Parliament in UK. Okay? Supposed to represent all people of the UK as a member of Parliament. All people of her riding. Here, let's read carefully what she tweeted. Black activist Sasha Johnson in hospital in critical condition after sustaining a gunshot wound to the head. Nobody should have to potentially pay with their life because they stood up for racial justice. First of all, she's implying here that she was shot because she was standing up for Black Lives Matter. She was not, as it turns out. But this MP has not retracted or clarified her statement one bit to this day, This is 2 full days now. She has not clarified that statement and not backed down. She's strengthened upon it. Secondly, she's not potentially paying for her life for racial justice because she never stood up for racial justice, as we shall soon see. This woman, Sasha Johnson, is, if anything, had a very bad encounter with karma. Sasha Johnson was a pure, deep racist, a hater of white people, a hypocrite, pretending to stand up for social justice, for racial justice, like the entire Black Lives Matter does. They're just pretending. They are fake. They are Marxist feminists. They hate men. They used black men for fundraising only. This is the face of a pure racist who had a very unfortunate and life-changing encounter with karma. Let's read on. This is a quote, a tweet captured from Sasha Johnson before Twitter suspended her account. "The white man will not be our equal but our slave. History is changing, no justice, no peace." Is that what you call, this is a member of parliament in the UK. You folks in the UK should be demanding her resignation immediately. No questions asked. She's a racist. She's supporting racists. This is clear racism. This has nothing to do with racial justice. Read this again. This is Black Lives Matter. This is that MP of the UK. That's her thinking. The white man will not be our equal, but our slave. I got to give Sasha Johnson at least the credit of being honest, unlike most of Black Lives Matter. But Sasha Johnson is also incredibly stupid, thinking that Black Lives Matter has anything to do with racial justice, thinking that you can look for slavery of white people and call it racial justice. But then being stupid seems to be a requirement to sign up for Black Lives Matter. Stupid or ignorant or some combination of the both, of the two. Let's read on. This was my comment here back on Twitter. You can't make this stuff up. BLM leader shot by black men, and they were shot by 4 black men at a party. It looks like a rival gang, but the UK MP to this day does not alter or clarify her statement on this issue. They are trying to spin it as a symbol of white on black crime. BLM is a feminist group. It hates black men and only uses them for fundraising. And we've got the proof of that, and I did the video on Get to Know Black Lives Matter over a year ago at this point, or about a year ago. Have a look at it if you want to know the truth about Black Lives Matter. This is that complete idiot who is voted into power in the UK, who supports Black Lives Matter and is constantly tweeting about Black Lives Matter and racial justice, while whitewashing aside the incredibly racist statements made by the people she admires. She admires them. She's a member of Parliament for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. This is Diane Abbott. Spread the message, folks. Spread the tweets. This woman should be resigning. It's a disgrace that the UK has members of Parliament like this. It's a disgrace. And you will not have racial justice or racial peace while you're promoting racism. This should be simple to see. And this is part of the comic tragedy of Western politics. Let's read on. This is another tweet from Diane Abbott. 1 year on from the death of George Floyd, the key social indicators of racism haven't moved in the UK. But through the Black Lives Matter movement, a new generation has entered the struggle for racial justice. This, she tweeted after the information about 4 black men shooting Sasha Johnson. She's not changed her tune. Nothing can shake these ignorant doofuses from their ideological perspective. They are racists. This Diane Abbott is a clear, simple, racist bigot and should be kicked out of Parliament. Let's read on. Another one. My piece on the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. Black Lives Matter has been an object lesson in how to build a successful movement. The first principle is that those suffering the oppression must be allowed to lead the fight against it. Suffering the oppression. Buying 5 multi-million-dollar mansions off of the deaths of black men who you claimed have no place in black family. Black Lives Matter clearly stated that. It's all in the video, Get to Know Black Lives Matter. It was on their website. Black men don't belong in black families is what Black Lives Matter believes, like every other feminist group. This Diane Abbott is a sexist, racist bigot. Everybody who supports Black Lives Matter is either ignorant, stupid, or a racist bigot. There's no getting around that. Let's read forward. Whoops, I think that's all on that particular topic. Let me just confirm for you here. And, So the next topic we're going to get to is straight directly to the heart of American politics. And I say that quite seriously. This is the heart of American politics. AOC and the infamous squad. It's a squad of doofuses. What is so frickin', I don't know if that's a swear word. Is that a swear word, frickin'? Maybe it is. In any case, the American people voted these squad people in. So we can't blame it on the politicians themselves. This is what an enormous swath of Americans want. The most idiotic doofuses, the weak-willed, weak-spined, victim-posing doofuses. They elect them into office, and they have real power over the lawmaking process in the United States, which affects the whole world. This is a tragic comedy. This is the face of tragic comedy right there. Let's read the headline from Breitbart, okay? And we're going to see how the media protects these doofuses that have power in the U.S. AOC in, quote, therapy after Capitol riot. Lawmakers effectively served in war, says AOC. This was 2 days ago in Breitbart. Served in war. That was not even an insurrection. But that's a different story. The details of what really went on January 6th, they are not really fully out yet. But I'll tell you this, it was no war on the U.S. like our little doofus comic face here suggests. Now, I Googled AOC in therapy. And of course, about that interview where this information came out, several articles came up right at the top of Google. Look at this, People Magazine, The Blaze, Jezebel. Let's look forward at what else came at the top of the Google search. Okay, AOC, this is Business Insider, Washington Examiner, The Blaze. Let's have a look forward some more. All talking about that interview and AOC's comments. Jezebel, Scary Mommy, Independent UK, all talking about that interview, okay? This is at the very top of the Google searches of AOC in therapy. So it's big on the news. Google knows it's big on the news. And here, even News Yahoo, AOC reveals attending therapy. Then AOC's own Twitter account came up, which doesn't even mention the interview and the comments that she was talking about in the interview. So now we're getting out of direct, and that was 4 days before. 4 days before the other article came out. So let's have a look a little bit further here at what these articles talk about with respect to that, because this is very revealing. AOC said some very insanely stupid, ignorant, childish things in that interview, and AOC was serious. Okay? So what does Jezebel do? Okay, here's Jezebel's take on AOC in that interview. Alexandria Cortez says she's in therapy for trauma related to Capitol insurrection. Jezebel. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like so many of us, is in therapy. Wow. Immediately, first sentence, what are they doing? They're wrapping her in the cozy familiarity of all of us. You know where this is going with Jezebel. Complete protection of this utter, dangerous, imbecilic, moron AOC. So let's have a look here. I'm going to pause here. I see Janice has popped into the comments. Hi, Janice. And Janice says, the near irresistible lure of damseling. I think somebody did a video about that. Yes, you did. And it's an excellent video. And everybody should watch that video. Focusing on AOC and her celebration of herself as a victim, incapable of rational response. Janice says this, puts this very, very clearly and wonderful in that video. You should have a look at it. And this is on full display right here. And I paraphrase some of what Janice has said in that video. I will paraphrase in it because it's in the back of my head. I remember the video quite well. Let's move forward here. Oh, AOC isn't. I wanted to focus on this particular line right here that interjected in Jezebel. This is a clever injection of a phrase here. Like so many of us. This was cleverly and consciously interjected in there to make Ocasio-Cortez feel like she's just like you and I. She represents the people. She represents the people, in other words. She is a legitimate representation of the people. Crap. Well, maybe it's true. Maybe there are that many completely imbecilic voters out there, and AOC represents them. If you look at YouTube with the proliferation of cat videos and makeup instruction videos, you might believe it. Anyways, let's read on. In an interview last week with public radio show Latino USA, Ocasio-Cortez said she goes to therapy to deal with, among many other things, that I don't doubt. A woman like that has got to have a lot of problems. Or maybe it's all fake. Maybe it's all fake problems. Maybe she just doesn't have anything serious in her life to deal with it. Now she has to deal with her color of her fingernails and stuff in therapy. Who knows? The January 6th attacks on the Capitol, among any other things. Let's read onwards. Reading from the top. In the live, I think the live stream she did on, I think it was on Instagram, she described hiding in the bathroom in her office while voices outside yelled, "Where is she? Where is she?" At one point, someone opened the bathroom door and she barely managed to remain hidden, pinned against the wall. If you believe that, I've got a nice bridge to sell you. But in any case, Janice discussed that also in her video and what the significance of those things was. Let's read from the top here. And this was the moment where I thought everything was over, Ocasio-Cortez said at the time. I mean, I thought I was going to die. Come on. Does anybody believe this, really? And I had a lot of thoughts. I really just felt that if this is the plan for me, then people will be able to take it from here. Ah, isn't she so courageous? I had a lot of thoughts, but that was the thought I had about you all. What a politician. She's certainly learning the politician game. If politicians means you need to appeal to the lowest and dumbest among us. Let's read from the top. Oh, this is... I already read this bit here. No, I didn't. Okay. In the live, she described hiding in the bathroom in her voices outside. Where is she? At one point, opened the bathroom door, barely remained hidden. She later learned that the voices belonged to Capitol Police officers, but at the time she believed they were Trump rioters. Sure. This is just whitewashing her hysteria here. Now let's have a look at what, and I'm going to point out too, remember what this article in Jezebel is not talking about. The article in Jezebel completely ignored the most absurd statements that should have been front page news in every article. Absurd statements that AOC makes. But let's see how People protects and elevates poor old AOC who thought she was going to die protecting the U.S. for us all. Here, the title at People magazine. Rep AOC sought therapy after extraordinarily traumatizing Capitol riots. I'm doing therapy, but also I've just slowed down, says AOC. And this was May 22nd. Let's read a couple of quotes from that. Rep AOC is opening about her mental health after the January 6 riots on the Capitol and the active insurrection attempt by former President Donald Trump. Look at how People magazine now is making it look like AOC single-handedly stood up to President Trump's insurrection. It's not President Trump's insurrection. This is an absolute lie. They really should be sued for this. And they should be laughed off the planet. President Trump, active insurrection attempt, and of course AOC standing in the way, bravely, ready to lay down her life. God, it's nauseating. The tragic comedy of this is nauseating. Let's read on. Oh yeah, I'm doing therapy, but also I've just slowed down, Ocasio says. I think the Trump administration had a lot of us, especially Latino communities, in a very reactive mode. Now I remember unlike anyone who follows AOC, I actually remember the lead up to the election. The Latino community was very strongly supportive of Trump. But here she says, I think the Trump administration had a lot of, especially Latino communities. Let's have a look at that claim here, or that suggestion. Let's have a look. Here's a Google about the Latino communities in Trump, with Trump. In the New Yorker, the deep origins of Latino support for Trump. That's December 29th, 2020. The deep origins of Latino support for Trump, AOC. Do you know how to read? Do you read anything outside of your soapy box stuff? No, apparently not. The New York Times, April 2nd, 2021, as recently as a little over a month ago. Trump's Latino support was more widespread than thought. NBC News, Latino Republican support for Trump is still going strong. That's May 1st, 2021. And yet, people like AOC get away with the most absurdly false statements. This reflects extremely poorly on the American electorate. People actually voted AOC in twice. Twice. Americans, what's in your water? This is ridiculous. You're being led by absolute, spineless, victim-posing imbeciles. Total imbeciles. Let's read on, back to the article here in People magazine. Ocasio-Cortez previously said she feared for her life during the January 6 riots. I did not know if I was going to make it to the end of the day alive, she said in an Instagram Live a week later, while calling out Senator Cruz and Senator John Hawley for encouraging the riots. Happy to work with almost any other GOP that aren't trying to get me killed. Oh my God, folks. And the media aren't holding her feet to their fire on this nonsense. This absolute hysterical, self-serving, self-pitying nonsense. She wrote in response to Twitter, in the meantime, if you want to help, you can resign. Americans, don't let yourself be led by imbecile children. This is what happens. You end up with an imbecile like AOC in there and the whole left media supporting her. This is absolutely absurd. Let me just pause here for a second and just pop a couple of comments randomly up on the screen. Derek Workman says she mistook Latino community for the Latinx community. From what I understand, they don't like each other much. I don't think there is actually, I could be wrong, but I don't think there is a Latinx community. That's pure fabrication of the idiotic, rename everything leftists. But I could be wrong. And let me quote another one here. Somewhere, Michael Keller is up here today again. Michael says, are men in the States so desperate? I'm not sure desperate about what, but I mean, maybe there are not enough adult men in the States to stop somebody as imbecilic as AOC from getting into power. And Janice says, she announced that she was a sexual assault victim in the same video in which she talked about her trauma in the Capitol. Well, that may be true. I don't doubt that at all. And, you know, it's safe for any woman, especially someone in power, to say she was a sexual assault victim because nobody's going to question her on it. Absolutely no one. And she gets instant survivor status, and the media will fawn all over her and be even more reluctant to question anything she says going forward because she's a survivor. She's now halo around her head. She can't be questioned. These are the people leading the U.S. today. This is absolutely stunningly incredible. Let's read on. This is the Washington Examiner. AOC says she's in therapy due to trauma at Capitol riot, May 24th. Again, that one had nothing to say about the outrageous nonsense that regularly comes out of the mouth of somebody as imbecilic as AOC. Now we had to go to Breitbart, and keep in mind that the Breitbart article did not come up on the first page of Google searches into AOC in therapy. All of these other ones, all these other mainstream medias, some of which have less readership than Breitbart. Breitbart is actively suppressed in every technical company. Why? Because they're holding people's feet to the fire, literally. Let's have a look what Breitbart says about AOC's interview that didn't make it in. And what didn't make it in is what's going to be really revealing here about how the left wing, the left media are protecting imbeciles like AOC, just like the left media in Canada are protecting our imbecilic Trudeau. All over the Western world. And they're protecting, in the U.S., they're protecting Biden. If you notice how they treating him like a love-in they did with Obama. They non-stop attacked Trump, and now they're just protecting Biden every chance they can. So, AOC in therapy after Capitol riot, lawmakers effectively served in war. So there's a hint of part of what's the completely imbecilic words coming out of a completely imbecilic mouth. I'll expand this up for you. Reading in the Breitbart article, Representative AOC said she is in therapy as a result of the Capitol 6 riot, or what she described as an all-out attempted coup. Pointing figures, I think she meant fingers, at the Trump administration and contending it, quote, had a lot of us, especially Latino communities, in a very reactive mode, which I don't. Latinos are overwhelmingly in support of Trump. Reading from the top. And I feel like I learned this the hard way after my father had passed away when I was a teenager. She is always, like Janice pointed out, she is always portraying herself as a poor victim, a tragic figure, needing your sympathy and support, and deserving your sympathy and support, but also willing to lay her life down courageously for you. That happened at a young age, and I locked it away. You have to live with it for years, she continued, explaining she is in therapy due to the January 6th event. Reading from the top. Oh yeah, I'm doing therapy, but I've just slowed down, she said. I think the Trump administration had a lot of us, especially the Latino communities, in a reactive mode. Sorry for the repetitiousness of this. I've got several articles that I snapped from here. Recalling the event, reading from the top, AOC described how former Vice President Mike Pence was taken out of the chamber a mere minute before these, quote, these terrorists, insurrectionists got into the Senate chamber. This has to be the most comical, weak, quote, insurrection in the history of insurrections globally. Reading onwards. Quote, Pence was the one person, arguably, that had one of the most important roles in making sure that procedurally the Electoral College counts went on as proceeded. What was Pence's role in that? What was Pence's role? Sure, he's the vice president, but he doesn't touch a single vote or ballot or... Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think that's just fallacious. She's trying to make this sound as if they were going after Pence in order to solidify or take control of the counting and overturn the election. That's what she's trying to imply here. That somehow, if they had got to Pence, they would have been able to overturn the election. And imbeciles around the U.S. who support imbeciles like AOC will believe this. They'll believe this crap. Let's read onward here. This is AOC's words. 60 seconds could have meant potentially the difference between what we have right now and a martial state. The far-left lawmaker continued. This was an all-out attempted coup. 60 seconds getting a hold of Trump. In an insurrection where Guy was wearing a Viking mask outfit and there was no shots fired, no guns carried. You can't make this stuff up. And who are these cartoon voters who support AOC? We know that the left-wing media are protecting her. Did not one of those other articles talk about this nonsense that because it's just too stupid to repeat. Breitbart rightly calls it to the surface because it shows you the mentality of who we're dealing with here in AOC. A complete imbecile. And she is a leader of the U.S. Let's read on. If 60 seconds went differently, if a different door was opened, if a chair wasn't barricaded in a certain way, we could have a completely different reality right now, she added. We don't want to acknowledge that that's how close we got, but that is how close we got. A chair wasn't barricaded. A chair stood between martial law. Apparently, the U.S. is so weak that if you don't put a chair in the right place, the whole thing falls to the ground. This is AOC. Absurdity of this. And Breitbart was the only news organization that I saw in the searches that actually pointed out the absolute absurd, hysterical nonsense that comes out of AOC's mouth in this interview. The rest of the media organizations full out protected her and even tried to turn her into lionize her and make her appear as one of us in therapy, like so many of us, said Jezebel. Reading from the top. In the video, AOC said, quote, I thought I was going to die, and criticized those who sought to move past that day. AOC doesn't want to. She wants to continue her fame. She wants to continue grandstanding in trying to portray herself as this heroine who stopped the insurrection to take over of the U.S. Reading onwards. They're trying to tell us to move on without any accountability, without any truth-telling, or without confronting the extreme damage, loss of life, and trauma. I don't know. There's nothing more you can say about that. It's just pure hysteria. The reason, reading from the top again, the reason I say this and the reason I'm getting emotional is because they told us to move on and that it's not a big deal, that we should forget what happened, or even telling us to apologize, she said, adding, those are tactics of abusers. Look at the fragility of this woman. We either know that she's just acting hysterical for show, or she actually is that fragile. Either way, it's a horrible thing to have someone like that in control of the levers of power in the U.S. Whether she's just as fragile as she presents herself, she shouldn't be there. If she's hysterically lying through her teeth, she shouldn't be there. It's an embarrassment that voters voted her in the first time. The second time is inexcusable. Right now, by not kicking this imbecile out, you're just proving the American, maybe the U.S. experiment needs to come to an end. Imbeciles like this are a danger to the free world. Let's read from the top. Speaking to the radio show Latino USA, the far-left Democrat said, U.S. lawmakers effectively served in war. This is how absurd her thinking can get. That U.S. lawmakers effectively served in war. She wants to be known as a veteran, a heroine. And explained she took some time after the event. She confided in fellow squad member Ayanna Pressley, who told her she needed to recognize trauma. She's too traumatized to lead. Obviously, she should resign if she's that traumatized. We need, as Janice pointed out in her video, the inexorable lure of damseling, or the irresistible lure of damseling, that she's too traumatized to lead. She's too fragile to lead. I think I messed up my point there, but let's carry on. And this is the most appropriate meme for this whole fiasco, the whole stupidity of this. And this has come from it's not from the Babylon Bee, but it's another humor site like that, saying Biden awards AOC the Purple Heart for her bravery in the war of January 6th. It's a good thing that we have these comedy sites to put a perspective on the nonsense, the tragic comedy that is American politics today. It is a tragic comedy. American people need to wake up. Your country is rotting from within. It is rotting from within. The evidence, AOC and the squad, and Maxine Walters, and Nancy Pelosi, these are evidence at how deep the rot goes. Your country is rotting. Fix it, please, for the good of the entire world. And having said that, folks, that's all I've got for this session today. As I mentioned in the beginning, there is another section at 2:30. I split them up because, to be honest, I've been thinking I should try to keep these things at least under an hour, if not under 30 minutes. They've been going an hour and a half and more, partly because there's just so many screen captures to capture during any given day now. So much nonsense that should be talked about and laughed at in some cases, and in other cases, protested against. So this afternoon's session, let me get the title up for you again. This is at 2:30 this afternoon. And that is called The Rich Get Richer, the Poor Get Sicker. And it's about the coronavirus pandemic. And unsurprising to anybody who's been paying attention, every time there's some kind of catastrophic event in the West, for some reason, the rich get richer off of it. And the poor, they get sicker. They get poorer. Is this an accident? I think not. Tune in at 2:30 today for the second session of Coffee with Steve, the topic of which the rich get richer, the poor get sicker. And thank you for joining me today. And I will remind you, like I do after every section, do something you love today, do something you love every day. If you don't have something you love to do, find something you love to do. No matter how ridiculous it's getting, it's still your life. You have the right to enjoy it as much as you can. So, see you hopefully at 2:30. And signing off, Steve Brule from Studio Brule.